Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. What we're going to show you today is how you do a compression test on your engine. Now the engine we're going to be doing the compression test on is actually on my 4Runner. It's the Toyota 5VZ FE 3.4 liter V6 engine that you'll find on the 3rd generation 4Runners, 1st generation Tacomas, some older T100s and older Tundras. A compression test is pretty straightforward. We're going to actually follow the instructions right out of the factory service manual. Let me show you some pages. So basically, they just tell you to start with a warm engine. So you warm it up and you get it to operating temperature. And then the next thing you do is you remove the intake air connector because that gets in the way of the coil packs on the passenger side, and then you disconnect all your high tension cords, also known as the spark plug wires, and then you remove all the spark plugs, and then you start doing your compression check, and we'll show you that once we get to the engine. Pretty straightforward. It tells you have to have a fully charged battery so you can obtain an engine speed of 250 revolutions per minute as you're cranking it over. It mentions having the throttle fully open, so it's called a clear flood mode, and when you push the accelerator all the way to the floor, it basically turns off the fuel injectors, and that's what the purpose of that, to get air into the cylinders but also to turn off the injectors. Now some instructions say to pull a fuse to disable the fuel pump. Others say you disconnect an electrical connection at the fuel pump, which on our 3rd gen 4Runners is underneath the passenger seat. But you really don't have to do that, because by putting in clear flood mode with the pedal all the way to the floor, you're going to be turning off the injector. So you don't have to worry about any gas going into the cylinders while you're doing this compression test. Another thing, you have to disconnect the ignition, and by disconnecting the coil packs and the spark plugs, you're basically taking out the ignition component. So no gas, no spark, and then you're ready to go. It also talks about what kind of pressure you're looking for. So ideally you're seeing 178 PSI or more, and your minimum pressure, you don't want any less than 127 PSI, and you don't want to see any more than a 14 PSI difference between the cylinders. So let me show you a couple things I did to prepare for this job. So this is straight out of our valve cover gasket video. This is showing you the number of the cylinders. So this is the front of the vehicle here. And on the passenger side, you have cylinders 1, 3, and 5 as you go from front to back. And then on the driver's side, you go from 2, 4, and 6. Then I transpose that information to a piece of cardboard. When I pull the spark plugs out, I'm going to lay them in their positions. So later on, when I analyze what the plugs look like, I could see just from the wear on the plugs, maybe it'll give me an indicator of maybe something going on with that actual cylinder. So I'm going to keep track of where the plugs go and put them on this piece of cardboard. It makes logical sense when you're going to be doing this. If it's time to replace your spark plugs, get some new spark plugs. So these are some NGK spark plugs, and the ones I've got are the BKR 5EKB-11, stock number 3967. These are the dual electrode spark plugs that are recommended that you use with your 3.4 liter V6 engine. The special tool that you need to do this job is you need some type of compression tester. Now I decided to buy one from OTC because I do like their products. They're fairly high quality. So the OTC kit I got is number 5605. And so when you open it up, it has a list of instructions right on the lid for you to reference. And then when you go down, you look at all the tools. This is the main thing that you're going to be using. And then you have these different adapters. Because the spark plugs that I'm going to be using have a long thread, I'm going to use the longer thread one as opposed to the shorter one. So these are both M14 size. So the kit gives you this. And then it gives you some other adapters if you happen to have M18 spark plug holes, or M12, or an M10. And then it's got this deep spark plug tube application. This is supposedly for a Ford 3-valve Triton engine. So we're not obviously going to be using that, but it comes with it. Do you have to buy one from OTC or another Matco or Snap-on? No, you don't. You can probably find an affordable one at Harbor Freight, or just look online on Amazon. You don't necessarily have to spend the money that I spent on this, but I will put a link to this OTC kit in the video description. If you want to buy the same one, you can order it through Amazon. So why would you want to do a compression test on your engine? Most of the time you'd want to do a compression test is because you're trying to troubleshoot something. Maybe you're getting a misfire code. Maybe your engine is eating coolant. You're doing a compression test to see if the head gasket has failed. And then there's the other reason that I just want to basically know what the health of my cylinders are on my engine. By doing a compression test, it basically kind of lets you know how well your cylinders are holding compression, which basically lets you know how healthy your cylinders are. If they're holding good compression, that means your cylinders are doing good. The piston rings are in good shape, your valve seats are good, and you don't have a blown head gasket. So it's telling you something about your engine. But like I said, most of the time, the reason why someone's doing a compression test is they're trying to figure out something's wrong with their engine. They're getting a misfire, their engine is losing coolant, and they don't have an obvious leak. And now they're trying to see if they have an actual head gasket leak. Quite often, after a compression test and you find that one of your cylinders is low, the next thing you do is you do a leak down test. And we're not going to do a leak down test today, but the leak down test is the next step that you do to try to figure out where is that compression going. Is it getting past the rings? Is it getting past either the intake or the exhaust valve? Or is it getting through a bad head gasket? So those are the areas where you can be losing compression. So now we're going to get to it. We'll show you the things we're going to have to remove off the engine to get access to the coil packs and go from there. So we have to get this air box out of the way so we can get the coil packs off. In order to get the air box off, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these clips. Then there's an air hose right here that I'm going to slip off right there. There's also this air hose right here that I'm going to slide off. And then this air hose just clips in here, and I'm just going to pull this free of this clip. Just pull it out right there. The last two things I have to do to get this air box free is there's two clamps. There's one for the connection at the throttle body. I just got to loosen that clamp and pull back and slide this off. And then there's this other clamp that attaches the air hose to the air box. And I'm going to loosen that and pull that off. So then this whole thing will be out of the way to where I can get the coil packs off and start getting the spark plugs out. Okay, I'm going to attack this clip with just a flathead screwdriver. This clip is a little bit worn out already from me removing it. So you just got to compress it and get it out of there. There we go. See, a little munched up, but it still works. This other one here, it just has one little clip on this side, and I'm going to pull this little rubber thing away and push up to where it frees it. Now this wiring harness is no longer attached to the air box. I'm going to slip this thing off right here. Just twist it a little bit, break it free. And now that's off. I'm gonna twist this one, break this one free. Okay, that's disconnected. And this one just simply slips out of the clip. Now all I have to do is I have to loosen these clamps. So you could do it with a Phillips head screwdriver because it's got a Phillips head on it. But I'm just gonna choose to use a 10mm socket with a 1/4" drive, and I'm just gonna loosen the sucker up. Okay, that should be loose enough. I'm gonna loosen the other one. Okay, and that should be loose enough also. So now you just wiggle this off. So it's off the air box for the most part. And now I gotta wiggle it off the throttle body. You gotta fish it through these wires. Get it out of there somehow. Okay, now that's out of my way. Now you can see that I have access to the coil packs. So I could take those off and get the spark plugs off. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the spark plug wires that go from the coil packs on the passenger side over to the driver's side. And there's a clip on the back you have to pull away and then lift up, and it's free. Do the same with all the other ones. I'm finding it a little hard to get a screwdriver in at the right angle to get these next ones. So I just have this little cheapo pick tool that I got as a kit from Harbor Freight. It's just a 90-degree pick, and I could slip it behind the clip and pull towards the center of the engine and then pop it off. And I'm gonna do the same with this one. Just slide that behind there, pull towards the center of the engine, and then pull up. And now they're all free. And if you look here, I really don't have to worry about getting them mixed up, because the shortest one is going to go to the front, the next longest one is going to go to the middle, and then the longest one is going to go to the rear. So you have to actually try to mess that up. The next thing is I'm going to disconnect the electrical connection to the coil pack itself. We got a squeeze tab right here to disconnect the electrical connection. So if I push this in, it will free this and I can pull it away. So I just push with my thumb and pull back, and then it's free. And I'll do the same with the other ones. That one's free. And that one's free. Okay, now I can get the coil packs off. There's a lot of 10mm bolts on these engines. So I'm just going to zip it off with my Milwaukee cordless. There's one. Get this next one. There's two. The last one. Now I'm going to pull off the coil packs. Now, if you are having some type of misfire problem, I would suggest labeling these so you remember which one was which. So as a technique to diagnose what's going on with your engine and you're going to be swapping coil packs, I would make some type of mark either with a paint pencil or with some tape, with writing on the tape. I'm just going to keep them in the same orientation as they take off. I'm going to put them on the cardboard that I made. So here's the next tools I'm going to use. I'm going to use a 3/8 drive, a long 3/8 extension, and this is an actual spark plug socket. Now there's a couple different types of spark plug sockets. Some have a rubber grommet on this inside diameter so it actually holds onto the spark plug, but I have this cool magnetized one, so as you completely unthread the spark plug from the head, it will bring the spark plug with it because it's magnetized. So let me remove this one. And remember, this is cylinder 1. Okay, and you can see that it brought the spark plug with it. And these are a double electrode. These were iridium plugs. It's been 57,000 miles since I changed these. Now, should I have changed them sooner? I'm not so sure, because the iridium plugs were supposed to last 60,000 miles, so I'm right at that mark. But I'm going to take this off and I'm going to put it down on the cardboard. So this is the number 1 cylinder. Now I'm going to get the next ones. Once I break it free and it's hand tight, then I just spin it out with the extension. You no longer need the ratchet. Okay, they're looking about the same. This is cylinder 3. And this is cylinder 5. So I'll put that on the cardboard. Now the driver's side is a little bit harder to get to because you have plenums in the way, you've got the diagnostic, you got a lot of junk in your way to get these spark plug wires off the spark plug. So you have to get your hands in there. They do make this special tool, this spark plug tube wire tool, but I found that it doesn't really grab on as tight as I'd like, so I'm better off just getting my hands in there. And what is suggested is that you don't want to pull on the wire, you want to be pulling on the boot itself. It's a little bit hard. There we go, that one's out. I'm unclipping the wires from their little holder to where I can get a little more movement. So I got this one out of the way that's clipped onto here, and I'm going to move this clip, maybe pull this clip all the way off right now so I don't lose it, and I'm going to pull this spark plug wire out if I can. I haven't done this before, but I decided I'm going to take this diagnostic out of my way so it's easier to pull the spark plug tube wire straight out and it's not going to fight me as much. So I'm just going to get this ground wire out of the way for right now. Just going to put that bolt back in so I don't lose it. Now I can pull this thing out straight out a lot easier. Okay, so that's the first one out of the way. Now I'll work on the next one. These spark plug things actually do work fairly good. So I got this one free. Get that one out of the way. Again, you'd almost have to try to mix these up because they're all different lengths. I'm just going to move that one out of the way, and then I'm going to get the last one, which is maybe the hardest one to get to because it's way back there. Okay, I'm using my spark plug tube wire pullers, and it worked again, pretty good. So now all 3 spark plug wires are off the spark plugs. Now I can get these out. So I'm gonna go in on this side now. Okay, this is the number 2 cylinder. It seems this bracket for the throttle cable is in the way, so I'm just going to remove this 10mm nut so I can get the bracket off. Okay, and I'll just put that bolt back in so I don't lose it. Now I should be able to get a straighter shot at this spark plug. This is the number 4 cylinder, and the final one will be the number 6 cylinder in the back of the driver's side. And then there's that spark plug. Okay, the 2 things for my OTC compression kit: I need the actual compression gauge with the long hose, and then it will connect to this that I screw into the cylinder head on each cylinder. You see the O-ring here. This O-ring makes a seal, just like the spark plug will make a seal down below with the crush washer it comes with. This is going to make an airtight seal, and then we connect it up with a quick coupling, kind of like an air hose coupling, like so. And then I'll have Sean turn over the engine. When the needle stops rising, I will record that number on the piece of cardboard that I have the spark plugs on, and then we're gonna go to the next cylinder. So the flexible hose makes it nice, especially when we get to the driver's side, but we're on the passenger side right now. So I'm just gonna stick this in and feel for the threads, and it should go in easy. So I feel that the threads have caught, and I'm just gonna thread this in hand tight. I wanna make sure that the O-ring is seated, and that should be good. I got it hand tight. Now I'm gonna grab my compression gauge. I'm gonna pull back the sleeve and connect it just like you're connecting up an air tool. Now the next thing we have to do is you need a partner for this unless you have a remote start. So remember that clear flood mode that I talked about. This is a mechanism that's built into the engine where if you have the gas pedal all the way to the floor, so you have the throttle plate all the way open, it's telling the computer not to send gas to the cylinders. It's acting like the engine is flooded. This turns off the injectors. Sean's gonna get inside the vehicle. He's gonna push the gas pedal all the way to the floor, and then he's gonna crank over the engine till I tell him to stop. Okay, so now Sean is gonna push the gas pedal all the way to the floor. So you saw the throttle plate open all the way. Now he's gonna turn over the engine till I tell him to stop. Okay, stop. That cylinder went to right about 210. So now we're gonna go to the next one, and we're gonna do every cylinder just like I just described, with Sean in the vehicle with the gas pedal all the way to the ground, and he's gonna turn it over until I see the needle stop rising. Okay, now we're on the next cylinder, which is cylinder 3. Sean's gonna do the same thing. Put the gas pedal all the way to the floor and crank it over till I tell him to stop. Go ahead, Sean. Okay, stop. And that one also went to 210. And what I didn't mention before is you can release the pressure right here, pushing this button. Then it makes it easier to disconnect the quick coupler. Okay, now we're on cylinder 5, which is the furthest most back on the passenger side. Go ahead, Sean. Okay, stop. That one actually went to about 190. Okay, go ahead, cylinder number 2. Okay, stop. Okay, now we're on the middle cylinder on the driver's side, cylinder 4. Go ahead, Sean. Okay, stop. we're on the last cylinder, cylinder 6, which is the furthest most back on the driver's side. Go ahead, Sean. Okay, that's good. So here's the results, front to rear. So again, the front of the vehicle's here. This is the passenger side. So cylinder 1 came up with 210, cylinder 3, 210, cylinder 5, 190. On the driver's side, cylinder 2 was at 180, cylinder 4 was again 210, and 6 was 210. So the lowest cylinders on my engine were cylinder 2 and cylinder 5. Remember, the factory service manual said that you're looking for 178 or higher, and the difference that the factory service manual suggested between the cylinders is no more than 14 psi. I'm obviously over that. My highest cylinders were at 210. That was 4 of the 6 cylinders were at 210. One was at 180, one was at 190. So am I overly concerned about this? Not really, because at least the compression on all my cylinders is pretty good. They said that you'd want to see 178 or higher. So my most problematic cylinder is the cylinder number 2 on the front side, on the driver's side. Now you might be wondering, why did you actually have to remove all the spark plugs for this test at the same time? Well, remember what I was saying, that a low compression value could mean that you have a head gasket problem. With the head gasket, it could be leaking out into the coolant channels, but it also could be leaking out to the adjacent cylinder. So say for instance where you're losing compression on the cylinder isn't to the adjacent cylinder. If I kept the spark plug in this cylinder while testing this one, if I did have a problem with the head gasket between the 2 cylinders, then I would get an inaccurate result. It would actually show the compression is good when in reality it's not, because there's a loss of compression between the cylinders. So that's one of the reasons why you remove all the spark plugs at the same time when you do this test. Now, opening the throttle supposedly puts it in clear flood mode, but we were clearly smelling gasoline doing this. I'm sort of thinking now that even though the factory service manual says you don't have to disconnect the fuel pump, I would reference our video, the link will be above here, on replacing the fuel filter, and we show how to disconnect the electrical connection to the fuel pump by going behind the driver's seat, lifting up the passenger seat, and pulling up the carpet and disconnecting that. So you can check that video to see how we did that. So I think if I did it again, I would disconnect the fuel pump because I am smelling fuel. The other thing is when we were turning the engine over, we were hearing a weird popping sound, and I don't know what that is, but I hope once I get the spark plugs back in, nothing's wrong with my engine. So I have no clue what that is, but I just wanted to let you know that. So when you're doing a compression test on your 3.4 liter V6 engine, you're not freaking out that you hear some weird noise while you're turning over the engine. Now that we completed our compression test, we're going to get our new spark plugs back in. So again, grab your long extension with your 5/8 spark plug socket, and then let me show you something with these spark plugs. If you're ever wondering if you changed spark plugs before, they come pre-gapped. So the whole reason why they have this little sleeve in here is to protect the electrodes so they don't get smashed in shipping or when they're on the parts shelf. So that's what these little sleeves are for, to protect the electrodes. So you can pretty much be confident that the gapping is going to be correct and they didn't get smashed. So I'm going to slide this in here and the magnet's going to hold it. And now I'm just going to go down into the cylinder. The main thing you want to make sure is you don't cross thread and damage your head. You should be able to thread this in all the way to where it reaches the crush washer on the spark plug. So now that's in there. If you're wondering what the crush washer is, it's this little washer right here, and it's got a rounded side to it. Once it hits the cylinder head, it crushes down and holds the spark plug in place better. I normally don't use a torque wrench for spark plugs. I've changed a lot of spark plugs in my life, but I am going to do it this time just to show you on the video. So the factory service manual says the torque spec for the spark plugs is 14 foot-pounds. I'm choosing to use my inch pound, so I did a conversion, and 14 foot-pounds is equal to 168 inch-pounds. So you're going to feel it kind of crush down that crush washer, and then it's going to start getting tight. And that means you've compressed the crush washer all the way, and then it clicked at 168, and I'm done with that one. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get them started by hand first and then torque them to 14 foot-pounds or 168 inch-pounds. you just do the same thing. And remember, the driver's side is going to be a little tighter, but since you move those electrical connections and bracket out of the way, you'll be able to get the spark plugs in no problem. We got all the spark plugs back in, and now we're on the driver's side, and we're going to start pushing the spark plug wires back onto the spark plugs. So you slide it down, and then you actually feel it snap on to the end of the spark plug. So you push down, and you could feel it seat, the electrode connection connecting to the spark plug, and then you know that you got a good positive connection, and you could go to the next one. So again, slide it down into the hole, and then push down and feel it pop into place. There we go, that one's good. And the last one. Again, push down till you feel it snap in place. There we go. Now we got to get some of these brackets that we moved out of the way. So see this tube right here? I pulled this tube out of its little slot to help me get access to that rear spark plug. So I'll just push that back in place. There was a bracket here, so I got to get that bracket back in place. I'm just taking this 10mm bolt out, and don't drop it, Tim. Putting this back on. I hope nobody's going to worry about a torque spec for this. It's just a little bracket holding the accelerator cable. So I'm just cinching this up with a 10mm socket, and I'll slide this back in place. That's for the accelerator cable. I found that the diagnostic was getting a little bit in my way getting the spark plug back in, so I slid it off its little clamp. So I'm going to slide that back on, and then I have to get this ground strap back in, and I have the bolt for that. I also noticed this little bolt was kind of getting in the way of getting a straighter shot with the extension for this front cylinder, so I just took it out the rest of the way. Get it in there, and again, I'm not going to worry about a torque spec for this. It's just holding a ground wire to the plenum. I'm just going to cinch it up snug and call it good. Okay, I'm going to put the coil packs back in the location that they were. So this was the #1 cylinder. Just push it down to where it's all the way seated. I'm going to get one of the bolts started, and then I'm going to torque these actually. So I'll give you the torque spec for these. So I'm just going to get them started, and then I'm going to get the next one in. This one slid into place, and a bolt started, and the last one. So the torque specs for these 10mm bolts that hold the coil packs to the valve cover are 69 inch-pounds. Very light torque spec. That's it. Super light. Now we're gonna reconnect our electrical connections. Just snap them in place. Okay, now we got to get our spark plug wires reattached. So again, these just snap in place also. And then a good test is pull back a little bit and make sure that they're all the way seated. So if it's snapped in place, you won't be able to pull back on it. So now we're going to get the air box back in place. Go underneath this. How am I going to get this in? Go in like this, maybe. Yeah. Go underneath the cruise control. Gotta finagle it around. Choose what side you want to get in first. I don't know if it matters. I'm going to get the air box side in first. And then be careful with these things. If they're a little bit old, they're kind of brittle, so don't tear it. Got to get it pushed back and then wiggle it on. There we go. And finally got it. So now I got to tighten these clamps up. Again, you could use a Phillips or a 10mm socket. I'm going to use the socket. Doesn't have to be super tight, just snug, so you don't have an air leak. Okay, and get the other one. Okay, So now I'm going to get all the tubes that I disconnected. So I'm going to slide this one on here. And then I'm going to slide this in its clip right here. I'm going to go back here and slide this one on here. And then now I just got to push these clips for this wire harness in place. So bring it up, snap it in place, and then push this one in place. It slides into this flexible rubber sucker there, and that should be it. Everything should be reconnected as it was. Now I'm going to start it up, and hopefully nothing weird happens, because the only thing that's causing me a little bit of worry is that popping sound as the engine was turning over. I have no idea what that was or what was causing it. Let's start it up and see what happens. Starts fine, so I think it's good. Now, the compression test is a pretty good diagnostic tool to tell you the health of your engine, of all the cylinders. You could actually tell some things just by looking at your plugs. If it was really oily, then you could assume that oil is getting past your rings and your piston rings are a little bit worn out. I'm not going to try to profess that I'm an expert at reading spark plugs and what you'll be able to read by looking at them. So I'm going to do a little research and put a couple links to things that I see as maybe good online references to how you can read your spark plugs and what it will tell you. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, the next logical step, if you see a cylinder that's really low, you want to figure out where that compression's going. So you do a leak down test. You hook up a leak down tester with a compressor. You compress that cylinder when it's at top dead center, so the valves are closed and the piston's all the way at the topmost position. You're trying to figure out where that pressure is going, whether it's going past the rings, whether it's going past the intake or the exhaust valve, or it's going out through a bad head gasket. So I need a test vehicle for that. It doesn't really do any good to do a leak down test of an engine that's in good shape. You want a cylinder that is obviously losing compression and test that one. So if you happen to be in the Bay Area near San Jose, California, and you're having a problem with your engine, hit me up online and maybe we can get you over to the house and we can do a compression test followed by a leak down test of your engine to see where that compression's going, where you're having a problem with your engine. A test that you can do in a follow-up with just the basic compression test is you could squirt a little motor oil inside the cylinder and then redo the test. And they call it the first test is a dry test. The other test is called a wet test. You're putting a little oil, and basically that oil on top of the piston is making a better seal for the rings. So if you had a low compression test for a dry test and then you followed it up with a wet test and your numbers went way up, that pretty much points you to the fact that you have worn piston rings, and that's where you're losing your compression. I didn't want to bother doing that because all my cylinders were pretty good, but that is another test you can do to basically narrow it down to the piston rings. If you see a much greater number after doing the wet test, you know that it helped seal the rings against the cylinder wall, and that's most likely where you're losing your compression. But the hands down test is to do a leak down test to really know where the pressure is leaving the cylinder. I got the results from the compression test and I thought, okay, we're done with this job. But I started thinking that because the video process takes a while to do and I really never even drove my vehicle to get it to operating temperature, I just let it idle in my driveway. So I was thinking that possibly I got inaccurate test results, particularly for those two cylinders that were a little low, because as we were shooting the video and it was taking a while, the engine cooled down and maybe I wasn't getting the most accurate results. So what did I do? After we buttoned everything back up, I took it for a drive and I really got it up to operating temperature again. I drove it for about 30 minutes, came back to the house, stripped everything down really quick, pulled the plugs, and I redid the compression test. Mainly on those two cylinders. On the driver's side, it was the number 2 cylinder in the front, and on the passenger side, it was the number 5 cylinder in the back. And what I found is both those cylinders came up to 210. If you remember, the number 2 cylinder was at 180 and the number 5 cylinder was at 190. So that's even better. So now I'm even happier with the results, that knowing that they pretty much all came to 210 psi. So my engine is in pretty darn good shape. What I'm trying to say is that make sure that your engine is at operating temperature. Make sure it's really hot, and strip the parts off the engine quickly. Don't dilly-dally around, and get your compression test done when the engine is still really warm. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that on both occasions, after I disconnected all the spark plugs and did the compression test, when I got back in and started the vehicle, I had a check engine light. And because I have an OBD2 Bluetooth reader going to Torque Pro app, I was able to read it really quickly, and it came up as a 1300 for a powertrain fault. So I just cleared it out, and I don't know why it causes a powertrain fault, but that's something to note, that if you see the check engine light after you get done with this compression test on your Toyota 3.4 liter V6 engine, or maybe you get a check engine on whatever engine you're doing it on, just use a reader, whatever you have, whether it's a phone app or it's some type of scan gauge or some other type of reader that you buy at an auto parts store. Check it out. Most likely it was because of the fact that you were doing the compression test, you clear it out, and it never comes back. So I wanted to mention that. So I hope you learned something today. We thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. We'll be back with more videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Take care. Bye-bye.